Well, welcome to another edition of AP's Profiles in Christian Living. My name is Mark Powell, and my very special guest with me today, which I am deeply honoured and privileged to have, is Professor John Whitehall. Professor Whitehall is a Professor of Paediatrics here in Sydney with a lifetime of experience and has been really one of the sole voices speaking out about transgenderism, especially amongst children. And he's been particularly critical of the current legislation that is before the Victorian Parliament. Professor Whitehall, thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
It's great to have you with us, and thank you for your latest book. It really is an excellent resource for anyone to have. But I want to, before we get to the issue itself, this is AP's Profiles in Christian Living. You yourself are a Christian.
Yes.
Can you just tell us a little bit, just to start off with, how did you become a Christian?
I'm called by God, I guess. As a child, I don't recall a period in my life when I was not aware of the reality, the loving reality of a creator, and things developed from there. There was not a Damascus
Road
conversion
experience?
as such, no.
Yeah.
But it's been the best thing. It has been the backbone, the guiding purpose, the discipline of my life, and I'm very, very grateful for it. I've had extraordinary experiences. I've had a wonderful life, I say it myself, and that's because of the Christian backbone to it.
Now, you yourself are a Professor of Paediatrics here in Sydney, a lifetime of experience working in this field. How has your Christian faith been a blessing and impacted you in your professional career?
Well, it gave me a purpose. I believe that we have talents in order to serve, and it's easy to serve as a doctor. I was always interested in overseas situations and was able to have been able to work in many different countries. I have an active involvement in Bangladesh still, so it has opened doors, given me a purpose and given me a discipline. We all need a discipline. Even Jesus was tempted, so I can't imagine what I would have been like without it. I'm not saying I'm a saint. I'm a sinner in need of forgiveness and direction and new life. Mm. For all this, I'm grateful. It didn't come from me.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's fantastic. Now, if we could get to the heart of this very controversial topic today, although I say controversial, but what could be more basic than gender? Than a boy being a boy and a girl being a girl. And yet this is massively controversial today. Take us back to how have we got to this cultural moment? Is it thinkers such as Michel Foucault and others? How have we got to this point?
Yeah, I don't know. I've looked at that. I can't read Foucault and get past the first page. It's sort of obscure stuff to me. Maybe Kinsey had something to do with it, saying that a certain percentage of people were not as heterosexual as we thought. I don't know. It's the liberalisation since the 60s. Nowadays, I think myself breakdown of the family. And indeed, I'm just reading a recent report from Westmead. Most of the children who turn up at their gender clinic come from broken homes. And I think this is the sad situation. People are not making that commitment that they will stay together for the raising of the children. Mm. That's a major issue. And people are saying about the level of mental disturbance in children throughout the Western world, and I think that's one of the major issues, compounded by all the advice and influence they get not from their father, who's not usually there anymore, but from the web. And in particular with regard to gender dysphoria and these things, their advice, I believe, comes out from that source. They are scripted in what they say, almost scripted templated, structured in what they believe about it. They talk to each other. It becomes a social contagion. One of my grandchildren in a very respected suburb in Sydney was telling me the other day, he's in the last class before high school. 6 of the children in his class, he said, you know what, he asked me, what does it mean? He said, well, we got one who's asexual and another one is a bisexual and we've got a pansexual. And he said, what's this mean? I said, well, what does it mean to you? And he said, I don't know. And he said, I don't think they know. He said, I think the pansexual, I think that person likes everybody. And I said, well, what are your school teachers saying about it? And he said, well, they have to go along with it. We know they have to go along with it and give new things. So I think there is this tremendous pressure coming from electronic sources, and this is spreading. The impact is spreading like a social contagion. Those are not my words. I originally said it's like a social fad. But I think social contagion is a better word, and I think it's afflicting our young people in many different ways.
And I know you don't say that lightly too, because
no, I certainly don't.
Because I know I've read a number of your articles in Quadrant, which are excellent, and you look at the vast majority of children that you've treated over your professional career, which spans 30 or 40 years.
More than 50, actually.
Okay. I was being generous. But you've been a paediatrician for 50 years. You've seen a plethora of children come through struggling with gender dysphoria. What percentage of those children grow out of it, if I can put it like that?
Yeah, well, let me say just the first part of what you were saying is that it was very, very rare. I was a very, very busy paediatrician in the early part of my career. I was on at 3 public hospitals at one stage, even 4. And in all that period, well, I'm talking 70s, 80s, in all that period, people would come with problems that their children were facing, and they weren't embarrassed to talk about sexual problems or things like that, sexual behaviour or anything. Never in that entire period, never did anyone come and say he thinks he's a girl. Never. So when I became involved in all this, I asked paediatricians that I knew, 28 of them altogether, what do you think of this new phenomenon? Have you ever seen anybody? To a person, they said, well, no, we don't believe in this. And they said, we have seen some cases. However, there were 12 cases. 10 of them they remembered because of the outstanding associated mental disorder, and 2, outstanding prolonged sexual abuse. And in those days, if a child was talking, it was the opposite gender, that's what you were taught to think, sexual abuse. So there were 12 cases by 28 paediatricians, a cumulative experience of 931 years, right? And now we're getting throughout Australia hundreds of cases every year. So it has spread exponentially. There's no biological reason for this. There's no biological reason for it in any case. This is a social contagion. That's the only way I can understand it. Okay, so what happens to them? This is the second part of your question. This is not, what I've just said is my experience. Now I'll tell you other people's experience, people who have written about it. Kenneth Zucker, for example, in Toronto, who I interviewed several years ago. Their reports are that the majority of these children will grow out of this, the gender dysphoria stuff, through puberty, the majority of them. The Diagnostic and Scientific Manual of Mental Health, the sort of so-called Bible of it, talks about an incidence of 0.002% of women seeking help for transgendering as an adult, but people are saying that 1.4%, even 1.7, even 4% of children have gender dysphoria. Well, if you do the maths from that sort of 1.7 or 4% to 0.002, it's 99%. So the DSM itself says that a tiny minority of people are seeking help when they're adults. So it is the great reassurance. People should be reassured. Parents with disturbed children should be reassured that the large majority of them will in fact identify with their biological sex when they pass through puberty. And there are reasons for that. Hormonal reasons, for example.
Yeah, that's incredible. Incredible, particularly in the light of the current legislation from Victoria.
Yes. Well, that draconian stuff, and I have certainly called it that in other articles, is draconian law, a dictatorial law. It's based on the belief, and I think you can only understand that belief as an ideology, almost a spiritual belief, a utopian belief, that if the children are confused, and just talking about adults too with different sexual, it basically says no sexual orientation reveals a brokenness or a need of fixing. None. And then it says, what is an orientation? Well, it's the gender you might feel or the sexual orientation you might feel, but also practice. So they're basically saying that there is nothing, everything is normal. They don't even mention age of this sexual behavior. They don't mention family relationships or even species. Now, they're not dumb down there. The question is, why did they just all sexual orientation reveals no need of fixing? This is their words, not mine. So what's the answer to it? Well, they're saying that people should be encouraged to embrace that orientation. And then leading on to that is that if you do not encourage them to embrace it, or worse, if you try to bring them back to an orientation with their biological sex, that's called conversion therapy, which is a confusing term for Christians. It's basically meaning that what they're saying is you are not allowed to convert someone back to an identity.
Even if they give you their consent.
Yes.
Even if they ask you.
Exactly. Up to 10 years in jail if you do that. And hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines, more if it's a corporation or a church behind it. But just getting back to the children, right? So what they're saying is that what you must do is affirm the child in its decision as to its gender identity, which may, of course, in this case, not be the sex with which it was born. So you must go ahead with that. Now, and then they specified that psychotherapy, psychiatry, counselling, all this is a criminal act, not to mention discussion in the church, prayer or pastoral counselling. All these things are in fact criminal acts. So in Victoria, then you must, if you want to avoid being a criminal and going to jail, go ahead with this confusion in the child's mind as to whether it's a boy or a girl. You must go ahead with it at a social level, which basically means giving new names and dressing, their own toilets and so forth, and then go ahead with the medicalisation of it.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to really drill down and talk to you about, because I think there'd be a lot of parents in particular concerned about that. What are some of so can you talk us through what are some of the risks, the dangers, the problems with like surgery and particularly puberty blockers?
Yeah, well, we should, because there's a very interesting article just come out now from the Westmead Children's Gender Service, and a lot of things there I am encouraged by. The concept that you should, that as 70% of them at least have got mental comorbidities, and 70% have got family issues, family trauma, sexual trauma and so forth. You should sit back and drill down and try and work out why the child is confused. I agree with all that. But twice in this article, they propound the belief that puberty blockers are safe and entirely reversible. Safe and entirely reversible. This has been the mantra that has gone through all the courts in the family court before it abrogated its role. Safe and entirely reversible. Well,
is that true?
No, it's not true. And this now you don't believe what I'm saying. You look it up for yourself. Go to the work by Neil Evans, for example, the veterinary researchers in the University of Glasgow. I went there. You don't have to go there and talk with them. You can just download their articles. Every doctor, the gender clinic at Westmead, they can download these articles. So what Evans has shown, for example, is that if you put sheep on the puberty blockers, it affects their limbic system is affected. What's that? It's a middle part of your brain that brings together how you think, how you learn, cognition, how you feel, which is emotion, memory, sense of reward, integrates all that and then gives you a kind of an identity. It's a very fundamental part of your brain. Neil Evans and his mob found that if you put the sheep on it, and then asked them the ultimate sacrifice, would you please give us your brains to have a look at? Well, first of all, they measured them and found that the limbic system was hypertrophied, that is to say, unusually enlarged. And then, after the ultimate sacrifice, they found that the effects of many, many genes were altered, some upregulated, some downregulated in this central coordinating part of your brain.
What does that mean in practice?
Well, then they did the obvious thing. They asked the sheep, what does this mean, boys and girls? And they put them in mazes. So put your index sheep at this end and all his mates at the other end, and everyone's bleating at each other, and there's a maze to get through. The ones who were on the blockers didn't do the mazes as well. Their memory, their confusion, their decision-making was interfered with. And secondly, they were much more emotionally labile. The male sheep put their heads down, so to speak, and charged at the barriers, didn't think things through. The female sheep were much more emotionally upset. How do you tell that? I mean, I'm not a sheep person, but they're bleating all over the place, going to the toilet all over the place. Right. Nervous little sheep, right? These guys could tell that. Now, if you extrapolate that to these children, you're putting them on this. Well, first of all, some people get the grittiness. I'm going to push ahead with what I decided. I am a girl. I'm going to go for it. Or the others are emotionally labile, and they're already depressed and anxious. You see? I can't understand how the doctors don't look at this, but there is more to it. Last year, I think it was, they found that these sheep had a preference for the familiar than the new. So they were bunched around each other. And why is this important? Because the doctors are giving the blockers, they keep saying this, in order to give the child the time to think whether it is really a boy or a girl. Right. But first of all, they've damaged the limbic system, which interferes with the way you think. And then they are, as shown by the sheep and other animals, they don't like change. Well, what's important about that? Well, because you've started the child on the puberty blockers, and he's under the sustained influence of all the power figures in their lives, including on the web and so forth. And they're setting on the process, yes, you really are a boy or a girl, and when you're biologically, you're not. The sheep don't like change, which is a biological explanation why almost all children who start on the blockers go through to the next phase. You see? Right. This was just recently corroborated in rat studies as well. The rats were the same. They didn't like, they wanted the familiar. And they were emotionally labile. So we're giving this to children who are already emotionally labile under the concept that they can come up with a better decision. That's why it's biologically implausible. These are not I'm not referring, people should look up the Neil Evans work, for example.
And it's easily accessed through the internet.
Yes, PubMed for doctors. Look up PubMed or Google Scholar. Evans NP, right? Now, other people have, see this, they say, all right, that'll give you more time to think more clearly. And that person will be able to think whether they're a boy or a girl. Now, what makes you a boy or a girl is the issue here. If there's a little bit of testosterone, there is around about 6 weeks after conception, then the brain alters in a sex-specific way. Waiting there until puberty, then it's activated by the sex hormones that come from your gonads, testes or ovaries. Now, they're saying we'll put them on blockers and they'll be able to think straight as to whether they're boys or girls. But what I haven't mentioned is that part of that limbic system is an amygdala, which is also involved in sexual orientation or determination. And that's interfered with.
Okay.
Secondly, going back to the 70s, an American researcher named Pfaff, Donald Pfaff, P-F-A-F-F, people should look this up. He and others found that there was a primary center in the midbrain area, the mesencephalic grey area it's called, and that is involved in determination of sexual behavior. In other words, if you stimulate it in a prepubertal rat, it stimulates it for sexual behavior. If you knock it out, the sexual determination is reduced. So it's there determining whether you are male or female with all the desires and things going forward. So you're knocking that out. That's related to the hormone. It's affected by the hormone that you are blocking, as is the limbic system. That hormone affects the limbic system, affects the mesencephalic grey area, and of course what it does, that hormone you're blocking, it stimulates the pituitary gland to stimulate the testis and the ovary, which then release testosterone and estrogen in order to affect the brain, which has been patiently waiting to make that person into sexually male or sexually female. So if you block all this, how can you work out whether you're a boy or a girl? You see? You've done away with the limbic system, which is going to coordinate and help you think straight. You've added to your emotional disturbance, according to the animals, and then you've negated, you have neutered. In that sense, you have castrated the child from all the natural processes that's going to tell him, this is birds and bees, my son. It's all about the birds and bees, and you're a biological male. You see, that's why it's what they're saying is biologically implausible. And that's why I'm disappointed in the authors of the Westmead study, because they just say twice in that thing the effect of blockers is safe and entirely reversible. If I can find this literature, if you just plug it into the computer, bang, up it comes. They're not addressing that.
So, I mean, it's just so tragic and devastating, the result. Are we going to face a situation in 10, 15, 20 years of people suing
We already have. Yes, this is what the Tavistock case was all about. Kira Bell went ahead with transitioning and then was suing the Tavistocks in England, I'm talking about, the big national centre there, for wrongful treatment. Because she was saying that she was never told any of these things. She was never, and I've seen the explanations they give to their potential patients. And she never mentioned the work which is done in Scotland, 400 miles to the north. This is the same mantra, safe and entirely reversible. And let me just tell you about what happens when you put onto, the next thing is you go on to cross-sex hormones. In other words, let's take a boy, he thinks he's a girl, you're new to him, and then, hang on a second, he's now 11 years old or 12 or 13 or getting up, and everyone around him, he thinks he's a girl, and you're telling him he's a girl, everyone's getting breasts. The argument is it's cruel not to give him cross-sex hormones, which are going to give him breasts or facial hair if it's a girl going the other way. So the whole giving of the medicines is crept down until this early age. Well, what's the effect on the head? The number one organ is in fact the head. Not me. Hoshoff Powell, Zubiar, two independent people, have measured the size of the head, the brain that is, in, for example, adults. Well, not for example, in adults, for example, males who are on estrogen, right, to develop the breasts.
Yeah.
What happens to the brain is the question. We know what happens. They get breasts. What happens to the brain? They don't mention it. This is not mentioned in the Westmead thing. Those two reports, independent reports of measuring the effect on the heads, have shown, for example, Powell has written up that the male brain, and now we're adults we're talking about, that male brain shrinks at a rate 10 times faster than aging after only 4 months. Now, we have no idea, these studies have not been done, as to what happens if you put on a growing brain, and the brain grows through puberty. That's growth hormones, the corticosteroids, all sorts of things developing the brain. It grows in size and complexity and function and everything up to 25 years or so. These kids who go onto the blockers, and then cross-sex hormones at whatever age, 13, 14, 15, used to be 16, but it's creeping down, they're going to be on it for life. Yeah. And all Westmead can say is the evidence is sparse. But there is no evidence about, because people haven't looked at it, but there is evidence of what happens to the adults.
So if we could step back for a moment, and I'm sure a lot of parents in particular watching this would be deeply, deeply alarmed because, for instance, there's this growing push, especially from Victoria, but it's going to come in through the other states, that parental rights are being denied, and it's a child can't be allowed to get a tattoo, but it can actually change their biological sex. What advice can you give to parents in this situation where their child is possibly struggling, because it is a social contagion? They are coming home and they're saying, Johnny or Jane is not, or Johnny wants to become Jane and Jane wants to become Johnny. What advice would you want to be giving to them professionally, first of all?
I would look up Neil Evans, NP. I would look up Faf, D, W, I think his middle name is, and so forth, and learn of all this stuff, and then start a political program in Victoria, for example, to do away with that law, because otherwise the parent's stuck. Because the law mentions parents in your own home. You're not allowed to practice, it's a criminal act, to practice conversion therapy in your own home. Now, this is much broader than just gender dysphoria.
This is how serious it is for you, isn't it? It's not just, I'm counselling my child here. You're saying this law is such a bad law that it really needs to be challenged and people need to become politically active.
Well, yes. I mean, and you can't rely on the politicians down there because it was voted overwhelmingly by both Labor and Liberal parties and came in. Let me just go on about that. You can't discuss this with your own child with an intention of reducing, altering their sexual orientation. That means not only just gender dysphoria, but you know what? The law is basically saying that there should be no restraint on sexual activity. So in effect, it is illegal to counsel your teenage daughter or boy for sexual restraint during puberty. They could go to the Star Chamber, the Inquisition, which is part of this act, complain to them, well, my parents messed me around, now I've got mental health because I wasn't allowed to make love to every girl I wanted to, for example. And that's...
Which seems incredible because the age of sexual consent is 16.
Yes. Well, you see the law, are they stupid when they write the law? No, they never wrote any age to it. Moreover, okay, you think, okay, now I'm going to get in my car and go to New South Wales. The law says you are not allowed, it's a criminal offence to take your child or get help, take your child to another state or get help from another state. It's a criminal act.
Yeah, so if someone, even from Victoria, was to ring anyone in New South Wales, for instance, or Queensland, and say, look, can you pray for my daughter, or can you pray for me? I don't want these feelings of gender dysphoria.
Exactly.
You can be prosecuted interstate. Is that correct?
That's what the law says. Now, I don't know, they haven't spelled it out how that would come into effect, but criminal activities allow extraditions. This is not mentioned. So what will happen, we don't know. They could ring me and I could say something and maybe I'd get in the back of a police car and be taken to Melbourne and wouldn't come home for 10 years.
I mean, do you honestly now, do you see that as a likely possibility for you? Because you have been outspoken and you're one of the few to have been outspoken.
Well, we've sought legal advice on it, and the current legal advice is that as long as I don't speak personally in public, then I'm not likely to get into trouble. Now, if I spoke personally on the phone, that would be a different matter. Yes, but what I think is coming next is what was being discussed, for example, at the Labor National Congress, whatever they call it, down there a year or two back, and they were looking at how public broadcasts can be prohibited or stopped. And
like this, for instance.
Exactly, yes. So some people are saying, a bit of information coming out, that this is what's going to happen next. Because what I am doing here, if this was heard, and you and your organisation, your church, you're all part of this, the Victorian law says it's a criminal act to induce somebody to seek so-called conversion therapy. That is, to seek freely and volitionally by himself to be relieved of unwanted sexual pressures and orientations, and it's and they could say, that they were induced by this program
or harmed.
Oh yeah, those people.
Which is very subjective, isn't it?
Yes, everyone can say, yeah, I'm depressed, miserable, it's affected my life, and all you do is go to the Star Chamber, the commission which is set up, and then they will work out the charges that can be laid against you and would relay that and the alleged evidence. They can enter your house or your office or wherever and deliver that to the police. This is unbelievable. I couldn't believe that this would happen in Australia, and nor can I believe the power of the challenge to the Christian message. And this is one ideology trying to destroy another one. Why? How? What do I mean? It's this, that the Bible is full of advice for restraint. I think, going back to the Ten Commandments, how to make a civilization. You got to respect other people's property and their wives, and otherwise there's going to be chaos. So the Bible is not against private property, nor is it against sex, but it advises restraint, and that then could be extrapolated as sin. This is what we are talking about. If you steal somebody's property or his wife, this is nominated as sin. There is no sin under this new law. This was Old Testament advice, but the wonder of the New Testament is this great promise that you can change. There is new life. There is a new purpose. This is our gospel message, that there is a new creature. You can become a new creature. This is an extraordinary doctrine of liberty. Now, the Victorian law is criminalising that. Do you see?
Yeah.
They have abolished the concept of sin and criminalised the concept of salvation.
Yeah.
And Christian people don't see it as clearly as I see it. I hope I'm wrong.
Well, I mean, sadly, I think you're 100% right.
I hope I'm wrong.
I say sadly that you're right, because one of the things I am proud about is that our denomination, the Presbyterian Church of Australia, seems to be the only one to have been willing to issue a statement publicly regarding the legislation in Victoria.
I'm proud of you too, although I'm not a member of one of your churches, but you were the only denomination that signed up the interfaith letter. You and the Imams Council.
That's a strange bedfellows.
Yeah. So, can I just say this? Let's explain my involvement, because this always comes up. One of the major criticisms of me is that you're speaking as a Christian. Okay, and let me just say this, that I was fortunate to have 6 years medical training, lots more training, all this sort of stuff, read lots of books and stuff like this, and can come to an intellectual conclusion. So, for example, if I go into the ward and a kid's not breathing very well, unfortunately, I don't have any bolt from above that says, listen, you idiot, that's asthma and it's not pneumonia, and you must give these medicines and you must give them this frequently and in this dose. Right? I don't have that. I wish I did, but I don't. It's an intellectual business. When I read this stuff, Evans' work, Pfaff's work, or whatever, this is an intellectual business. There is evidence here that for everyone should see. There is no evidence for good effect. There is evidence that the kids are going to get better without it. There is evidence for bad effect. Why are we doing this? This is an experiment. We shouldn't experiment on children. The Nuremberg trials proscribed experimentation on children. This, to my mind, is intellectually implausible. Yes. Okay. Why don't I get up this morning at 6:30, drive here in the rain, and come and talk to you, because the Bible says, well, look, if you've learned something like this, that's called putting your hand to the plough, and you just can't give up because you feel tired. So I'm here from a behavioural compulsion to speak, but what I'm speaking is an intellectual thing.
Yeah.
And people can challenge both of those if they want to. But don't say that my conclusions are based simply because I'm a Christian. And that's what they do.
Well, and I must say, for full disclosure, I came into contact with your work in Quadrant, and you can easily access these still online, just Professor John Whitehall, Quadrant. There's numerous articles here on transgenderism. And you would not have known that you were a Christian, except that you were very gracious in what you wrote. But most of it was just, all of it was really just statistical information and helpful research. I started this interview by saying, you're a Christian, because so many people would be familiar with your work, but maybe not familiar that you're a Christian. So for full disclosure, I started this conversation today because I thought that was an intriguing angle, that you yourself are a Christian and I think are concerned with truth. One final question, and this is a great resource here that I know Reformers stocks, by Patrick Byrne, Transgender, One Shade of Grey. You also have a chapter in here by John Whitehall. Sorry, that's you, obviously. Why is this book helpful for people if they want to think through the issues?
Because I think I've got 83 references to other people's work.
Okay.
This is not my work.
So it's a great resource.
I have just said this, and there you go and work it out for yourself. I would love people to work it out for themselves because the Bible says you know the truth and the truth will make you free.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, look, Professor John Whitehall, thank you so much for joining us today. Really do deeply value your work and your commitment to the truth and your courage to speak the truth in the public square when so few, particularly in your profession, are not. So thank you. We wish you every blessing, and I'm sure I speak on behalf of many that will be listening and watching this. We pray for you and for your work, and thank you for what you've done. Thank you for joining us today, and I hope you've been encouraged and challenged by the things that we've discussed. Great book here by Patrick Byrne, which Professor John Whitehall has a chapter, Transgender, One Shade of Grey, the legal consequences for man, woman. It relates to school, sport, politics, and fundamentally democracy itself. I'm Mark Powell. This has been AP's Profiles in Christian Living, and I look forward to seeing you next time.